So I was born to a wonderful Catholic family, mom, dad, one sister, and one brother. We're from California, but we moved to the Midwest when I was a toddler, and I grew up in Indianapolis. The Catholic faith was incredibly important in my family growing up. I was raised a cradle Catholic and was fortunate enough to attend Catholic school all through grade school and through high school and even into college. I always enjoyed altar serving, starting in middle school, and I did that through high school. I just always loved the liturgy, and that sort of planted a seed, I think, in the back of my head sort of think about the priesthood. I wasn't super serious about it, but it was always kind of there. Um, in my senior year of high school, I got the opportunity to see Pope Francis in Philadelphia. One of my theology teachers took me to Philadelphia for the World Meeting of Families. And the day we saw Pope Francis speak, we waited for 8 hours on the front lawn of the Philadelphia Art Museum, just sitting there and watching the place just fill up with people. And finally that night when we got to listen to Pope Francis, we stood in this crowd of hundreds of thousands of people just so on fire for Pope Francis, for the Catholic faith, for Jesus. And that night, the reality of who God is and his love for me really hit home. It became, the Catholic faith became that night for me primarily a relationship with the eternal, unchanging God who loved me into existence and continues to hold me in an ocean of love every moment of my life. And from that relationship with God, what was always very important to me was a relationship with his people, with the church. So we came home from that trip back to Indianapolis, and I just thought about, who Pope Francis was and how I wanted to be a man just like he was. And I also learned from that trip that he's a Jesuit, and that was the first time I heard of the Jesuits. So I sort of started to think about that. The gears started turning. So we returned home, and ironically, I really questioned my faith for the first time. I just had these thoughts of, what if this amazing, surreal experience in Philadelphia with these hundreds of thousands of Catholics just on fire with the faith, what if that was all for a delusion? And I really felt like I had an existential crisis. I thought of this world without God as this world without meaning, where I would maybe live 80 or 90 years pursuing whatever wealth or pleasure the world had to offer, after which I would just die, and everything I'd worked for and worked toward would just become nothing, would just collapse into nothingness forever, for all eternity. So, like most people would do in that situation, I turned to YouTube for sort of just for answers, really. And I found Bishop Barron's channel on Catholic apologetics. I realized through Bishop Barron's videos that belief in God through the apostolic tradition of the church doesn't demand a suppression of my intellect and my love for learning, but rather raises it to a new level and really perfects my thirst for knowledge and my love for truth and beauty. Also what happened with Bishop Barron was I realized the historical reality of the resurrection, that this man, this historical figure, Jesus of Nazareth, really had risen from the dead, and that I needed to change my life accordingly. That really, for me, was the meaning of life. So after discovering Bishop Barron and having this existential crisis, which led me to an even deeper faith, I realized I needed to change my life with this reality and really give my entire life to Jesus. So I began to frequent daily mass at my high school, and I went to confession more often. I sought deeper personal prayer as well in my daily life. I had a friend at a local seminary at the time who knew a Jesuit who was able to provide me with spiritual direction. So we got in contact and built this wonderful relationship. His name was Father Tom Widner. We built this wonderful relationship, and he really introduced me to the Jesuits and to Jesuit life. And through these meetings, I was really infatuated with just the intensity of Jesuit formation, the intensity of the vocation, and the thought of giving my life to God in this way. And so I began seriously considering religious life as a Jesuit. just the story of Ignatius and the vows of poverty, chastity, and obedience were really attractive to me. That life of detachment from the things of this world, the things that distract me from God, from the God who loves me more than I could imagine. And so through the rest of my senior year, I continued to this deeper life of personal prayer, and I was fortunate enough to end up at a Jesuit university for college, Georgetown University in Washington, D.C., and there I was just so supported in my discernment and in my desire to grow as a Catholic. I continued going to daily Mass and monthly spiritual direction with a wonderful Jesuit I met there, and built lifelong relationships with multiple Jesuits at Georgetown. And I also got to make multiple Ignatian retreats through the Midwest Vocations team. And for the first time on these retreats, I felt like I had my own personal encounter with Jesus Christ through the scriptures, just as if I were, Mary Magdalene or Peter or James or John, having this personal encounter with Jesus and experiencing this personal, intimate call from him. And through these retreats, I really discovered the experience of St. Ignatius and Ignatian spirituality as a way to grow in deep love for God. So I applied to the Jesuits at the end of college and was fortunate enough to be accepted and come to the novitiate, the Midwest Novitiate in St. Paul. And it's just been a blessed time. We just made the 30-day spiritual exercises. And on the exercises, it was one of the best months of my life. And I just really experienced the grace to simply be with Jesus and to remain with him all the days of my life, which was just this simple grace, which was more than I could have ever asked for.